Good morning. Gonna start out with a couple songs. Page 330, Take My Life and Let It Be.
There is a balm Heavenly Father, thank you so much for waking us up this morning and for the opportunity to be here today. We just ask for your Spirit to be here and give us minds that can understand your word today. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. I have just a few announcements for us this morning. First of all, we have a bell that we're going to start ringing for you so that you can remember what time it is. So down there at the kitchen, there's a bell that will ring when the serving lane is opening. So if you're standing around waiting for a meal, just listen for the bell, and when the bell rings, you'll know you can get in line and it's time to eat. And there's a bell here also, and so about 5 minutes before the meeting, I'm going to ring that bell to remind you that it's time to come and start taking your seats, okay? There's also, for those who are camping, a small refrigerator that's plugged in between the bathrooms down at the pavilion. So if you have something that needs to be refrigerated, you can use that little refrigerator space. Also, there's a water cooler down between the bathrooms in the pavilion with some cups if you need some water to refill your water bottles, or if you don't have a bottle, there's a cup, and there's also one here in the back. If you're using the cups, just try to keep it with you throughout the morning as you're here in meetings so that we don't go through too many cups. And then also, just want to remind you about the bathrooms down there, to not lock the outside door and use the curtains instead. But just make sure when you're done using the restroom that you either open the curtain or you turn the sign so that it now says vacant, so that people aren't waiting and then there's nobody there. And I still have some space if anyone wants to volunteer to help out with song service or with playing the piano. So just get with me after the meeting sometime. And I think that's all we have. Oh, yes, I didn't add that to my list. So we're going to have choir, and the choir practice will be after lunch, before the afternoon meeting, today and tomorrow. And then there will also be another one tonight after supper before the evening meeting. So if you could raise your hand for me if you're interested in singing in the choir, so that I have an idea of how much music to print. All right, good. That's going to be wonderful. We're going to have a great choir. Okay, so thank you, and I think that's all the announcements that I have. Oh, yes. So one more thing about the animals. We have some animals out and about, and I just want to make sure nobody opens cages or lets their children open cages, because we don't want loose animals. I know they're cute and some of them are cuddly, but it just wouldn't be a good idea. The dogs won't hurt you. You're welcome to pet the dogs, but if they were loose, they would be a nuisance. Yeah, so about between 2 and 3, if you could be here a little before 2, that would be even better, because you're not going to be able to practice right up until 3 since the meeting starts. So maybe 1:50 to 2:50. If you're planning on being in the choir, try to get into that lunch line right away and be finished with your meal so that you can be out here in time for us to have choir practice. I'll go to your classes now down in the pavilion.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to at least not be in the rain. I mean, and the wind. Let me get to where I need to be. All right. So how was breakfast? Wonderful. Very good. Very good. Valentina and the crew do a wonderful job. We're very grateful to have them here and helping us out. And of course, everybody loves to eat. Yes, so eating is a wonderful thing. And it's nice to fellowship over food as well. And so praise God for that. This morning, we are going to look at the topic from function to dysfunction. And, well, let's pray again. Dear Heavenly Father, again, we are grateful for another day that you have made. It's a little chilly. We know you're going to make up for that tomorrow. And we are grateful for all that you do. And as we consider this body, and as we consider the temple that you have made for us and that we occupy, we ask for you to help us to understand its function and to cooperate with you in its function. And so, Lord, open our eyes to understand that we might know and that we might intelligently be able to work together with you in maintaining this temple for the good of all. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so again, we need to have a firm foundation. And I am going to, we talk about beating things to death. I'm going to beat this to life so that it becomes a constant reminder for us. There is a fundamental law of all nature. And that fundamental law is that nothing exists from itself and nothing exists for itself. Right? So everything has to have power, materials, resources. That power and material resources comes from outside of itself, must be brought into it in order for it to exist, function, and live. And nothing takes that power, material, and resources for itself. It does something with it. It's going to take those resources and pass them along. It's going to take the power and pass it along. It's going to do something with it, and other things are benefited by what's done. And so everything takes in order to give. And everything functions like a channel with an entrance and an exit, the taking at the entrance and the giving at the exit, and there's a using in between, and that's important. And then there's cause at the entrance, and there's effect at the exit. And just as a very brief review of last night, for those who were sleeping off your travels, and for those that didn't make it here, on yesterday we were looking at the fact that there is the fundamental law, and everything functions by that law. It doesn't matter how small or how big it is. In creation, everything functions according to this law of taking to give. And also, we looked at the fact that you and I are not just body, but we also have spirit. And so you have a mind. And the mind, I didn't put it necessarily in these terms, but the mind is not just the brain. But the mind definitely includes the brain. And if you don't have the brain, you're not going to have a mind that functions. But it must be the brain and the spirit together that you have the mind. And when it comes to the functions in the body begin in the mind. Right? And so they begin from there. And then the mind works together with everything else happening in the body, and we're gonna dive a bit more into that now. So to understand how taking, using, and giving work together in a complex living system with many components, we're going to take a look at digestion and the process of digestion, and we're just going to go step by step and look at take, use, give, take, use, give, take, use, give, and every step along the way, right? And I say every step along the way, but recognizing that physiology is very complex, and some of the steps we don't need to necessarily know. But anyways, so what happens? Well, first of all, your body's going to send a signal to the brain through the cortex, through the peripheral and central nervous system. So let's say, for instance, the stomach is empty. Well, there's receptors that are there, there's nerves that can check how much stretch there is in the stomach, and when there's not much stretch and so on, then there's going to be a signal that's going to be sent. And that signal is ultimately going to make it up to the cortex of the brain. And the spirit is now going to receive, it's going to take that signal, it's going to analyze it, and so that's part of the using. It's going to understand that the signal means hunger, and then it's going to make a decision either to eat or to not eat. And that decision is then going to be given back to the brain, or given back to the body. And then, when that decision is made, the spirit gives the power to the brain through its decision, and you're going to see that showing up as an electrical impulse in the brain, right? And then the neurons, the brain cells, are going to take that power in the form of an electrical impulse. They're going to transmit it to the end of wherever that nerve is. So they're going to use it. And then, so wherever that ends up, and then it is going to give. At the end of the nerve, the chemicals called neurotransmitters are released, and so there's a giving that happens. So the signal comes down here, causes the release of a chemical neurotransmitter, and that is given from the end of the nerve. And those neurotransmitters are taken by other cells near the end of the nerve. It could be another nerve cell that takes it and then continues the transmission, or it can be another cell of the body that takes in the chemical. And then what it does is those chemicals are taken into the cells. Then it changes how the cell functions. So this is going to be the using of it. And it's either going to increase, decrease, stop, or start the production of different products that the cell makes. So and what the cell makes is going to be what it gives, right? So as you see here, you have a taking, a using, and a giving. And then the next step, you have a taking, a using, and a giving. And at the next step, you have a taking, and a using, and a giving. That's basically the picture that we're working on, right? That happens in biological systems. So when those signals are given to the salivary glands, right, and to the stomach, and to the pancreas, and to the liver, and so on, each of those organs will now take, right, and they will start producing, increasing their production of digestive enzymes, acid, bile, mucus, and so on and so forth. So now those organs are giving. So they take the signal. Now they change their process. They either upregulate or downregulate, and then they produce something. And of course, you get acid in the stomach, and you get bile from the liver, and you get salivary amylase, and so on and so forth, and lingual lipase, and other things in the tongue, and from the salivary glands. We're not having a quiz on this. Don't worry about the names. I'm interested in you learning the process. Right? The simple things about process. There's no quiz on the various different names of what's produced, right? So the spirit is going to give power to the body through other decisions, right? So, for example, there might be the decision that you're going to eat. And so that's going to be taken by the body in a similar way, right? It's going to be through the central nervous system and by the nerves to the peripheral nervous system through the different organs of the body. And now you're going to have coordinated action, a taking, using, and giving of the eyes, so you can go look for the food, right? Of the organs of balance, so that you can actually, get there. And of your muscles, your cardiovascular system, and so on, all of the systems of the body to go look for and find the food where it's available, right? So all of those things are going to be coordinated, but they're going to be coordinated through the mind, right? And the physical structure of the brain. So that information is now going to be sent or given to the cortex, right? So you've got feedback information from the body and from all of these different organs, the ears and the eyes and the skin and the sensory receptors and so on. And the Spirit's going to take that information, it's going to evaluate it, it's going to use it, and then it's going to decide which of the food will be eaten. So you go and you take a look and you go, I don't want a cucumber today, let's eat a pepper. Oh, yes, let's eat some lettuce. No, not time for a tomato, and so on. And that will be given as a command to the body so that the body will actually reach out, take the things, and cooperate, and so on. And so then the Spirit is going to coordinate, it's going to use and give the action of eating, and that part of it is conscious to us, and it's also going to coordinate the process of digestion and the processing of the food, which is unconscious to us. So there's much that is done, actually the vast majority of what your mind does you're not aware of. The vast majority. It's only just a very little bit that you're aware of. All the rest of it is unconscious to us. And so in order to coordinate this, there has to be signals that are sent from the body, where the body is giving information up here to the Spirit, and the Spirit will then take that information and will analyze that information, so it's going to be using it. And so it's going to understand, all right, well, how much food is in the mouth, how moist is the food that's in the mouth, how much of the food is in the stomach, and so on and so forth. How long do I have to chew this before it's liquid enough for me to swallow it and it not get stuck, and and so on. All of that is happening up here. How much of it is composed of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates? Do you do that consciously? No, you don't do that consciously, but you actually have chemical receptors that can evaluate these things, right? That can evaluate what is the content, the molecular content of the food that you're eating, to determine how much of certain things you need to produce, like acids and other digestive enzymes and so on. And it's measuring what's the pH in the stomach, what's the pH in the intestines, what is the pH in the blood, how much of the different chemicals are in the blood, and so on and so forth. All of this is being measured. Now, how often do you think about all of this? Well, you don't, right? Consciously. But it's all things that you can measure. There are capacities to measure this in the body. And that's all information that's going up to the brain, being analyzed, evaluated, and then responses sent back to the body in order to coordinate, right? And this requires many sensors or nerves in the body that can measure those different factors, that can take and use it, and can send or give feedback to the brain about the different conditions that are in the body. And all of that is coordinated by the Spirit or the mind through the nervous system. So it will use and it will give. And when the decision to eat is made, the Spirit is going to then give the power to the brain through its decision. And the brain cells are going to take that power in the form of electrical impulses. They're going to transmit it to the end of the nerve, wherever that goes, right? And if that's a muscle, like in the mouth, and at the end of that, the neurotransmitters are going to be released, so it's going to give, and those neurotransmitters are now taken in by the cells next to the end of the nerve, and the result is that the muscles are going to contract and relax, so you're going to use and give, causing your hand to bring food to your mouth, right? So that part has to happen. Hard to chew food that's not in your mouth. But you've got to also chew the food, and so your neurons are going to give a signal to your face and your jaw muscles, and those are going to take the signal, and then they're going to open and close the lips and the jaw, and so you're going to use and give. Now you're chewing, right? And the neurons are going to give signals to your tongue, which takes those signals and moves, so you're going to use and give, bringing the food between your teeth. If you didn't have your tongue, how well would you chew? Nah, not very well at all. And sometimes the tongue doesn't seem to work very well either, because it gets stuck where it's not supposed to, and you go chomp and you go, because it got too close. It didn't just It didn't just push the food in between, it pushed itself in between the teeth. And so now the food can be broken down into smaller pieces through chewing. The neurons are now going to give signals to the salivary glands, which are going to take those signals and produce, which is using, and then release, which is giving, saliva. And that's going to make the food moist. It's going to release enzymes that you begin the process of chemical digestion. Salivary amylase, lingual lipase. Right? You don't have to remember that, but those are there. And yes, the process of digestion begins right there. Even chemical digestion begins in the mouth. So if you rush through your eating, well, you miss some of the important parts of digestion. And some people have said you don't have teeth in other parts of your body. So if you don't use the teeth up here, don't expect them to be used elsewhere unless you swallowed your dentures and you know how to use them in another part. All right. So now neurons give signals to the muscles of your tongue, your face, your throat. And those take the signals, they're going to contract, so they're going to use and give in a coordinated fashion to now swallow the food. And now your neurons are going to give signals to the stomach, which are going to take those signals, and they're going to produce or use and release, give, acid and digestive enzymes to continue the process of chemical digestion in the stomach. And it's going to churn, so it's going to use and give the food and mix all of the acid and the digestive enzymes along with the food to help in digestion. Because you got to get, all the food mixed in with all of the digestive enzymes. If you don't do that, it's not going to work so well. Now the neurons are going to give signals to the muscles at the top and bottom of the stomach. There'll be one right over here and another down here. And those are called sphincters. You don't have to remember that, but you have your cardiac sphincter and you have your pyloric sphincter. And when they take those signals, they're going to contract, and that pinches the ends of both of these tubes so that you can keep food in the stomach while you're churning it. All right? Because otherwise, if it starts doing its, well, then your food's going to go and then you're not going to have much to churn. So you got to be able to clamp off the bottom and clamp off the top, and then be able to churn and do all that kind of stuff in the middle without it going places where it's not supposed to. If anybody has ever had heartburn or reflux, well, you know that process wasn't working so well. And so when things were going churn, 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 this sphincter up here went, oh, I'm going to take a little nap. And it relaxes, and it goes churn, churn, and things go where it's not supposed to, and then it's uncomfortable. All right. So periodically, signals are given to the muscles, those sphincter muscles, so that they take those signals, they relax momentarily, so that small amounts of food are let out of the bottom of the stomach into the beginning of the small intestines. So that you can let a little bit out, and then later you can let a little bit more out, and then later you can let a little bit more out. And how many people do this? Everybody. How many people consciously think of this? Nobody. Yes. Yes. All right, I'm consciously thinking about this right now, and I'm making you consciously think about this right now. But yes. So neurons give the signals to the pancreas over here and the liver over here, which take those signals, they produce and release more enzymes and bile to finish the chemical digestion process. So bile comes from the liver. There's a gallbladder down there. It's a storage place for bile. If you don't have a gallbladder, your liver is still producing bile. It can't store it, and so it can't give you a big bolus of bile at one time. And so if you've had your gallbladder removed, and now you eat a fatty meal, because the bile is specifically for helping to break down the fats. And if you don't have a gallbladder and you eat a nice fatty meal, well, you don't get enough bile for the fats that you ate, and then your digestive tract complains at you, sometimes very vehemently. Now, once that food is broken down into molecules that are small enough it's now taken into the lining of the digestive tract. So here you have part of the small intestine, and the picture shows that there's various different layers, and then you open this up, and it's got these little kind of ridges in here. And if you take a look at a little section of one of these ridges, it has kind of like fingers that protrude out in here. And then if you take a little microscopic look at the very top of the fingers, at the top of those cells, it has little hairs on top of them. So these are called villi, these are called microvilli, and it just significantly increases the surface area of your small intestines so that if you were actually to lay it all out, it would be about the size of a tennis court in your small intestines, right? And all packed into a little space that's a little smaller than a tennis court, right? And anyway, so all of that is area where you can take these chemicals, you can absorb them into the cells, and then they pass through the cells. So there has to be a transport mechanism to get it from one end of the cell to the other end of the cell. And on the other end of the cell, if you look over here, you have blood vessels, right? So you're going to get it from the digestive tract in here, which would be out here, and then through these cells and then into the blood. And once it's taken into the blood vessels, the blood is going to transport it, and it's going to give it and take it to the liver. You're like, oh man, did I come to anatomy class? Yes, you did. You signed up for it. You didn't know what you were signing up for, but you know. Now in the liver, the cells are going to take the chemicals from the blood. They're going to process them. And there's a lot of detoxifying and so on that happens in the liver. It's very important. You know, don't have a liver, you're not going to last very long. And then it's going to give it into the blood, into the main circulation. So you have it coming through the portal vein. It has to go through all of these different cells to process it before it can get into the hepatic artery and then get back into the normal circulation. So there's a lot of processing that happens along the way. And once the chemicals are taken by the blood, they begin to distribute fairly evenly in the bloodstream. It's an old process we call diffusion, right? Where you have a chemical in a liquid environment, and when that chemical's in a liquid environment, just like dye in the beaker, it will eventually kind of spread out. So if I want to know how much of a chemical that you have in your bloodstream, where do I have to get the blood from? Anywhere. Right? It doesn't matter if I get it from the right side of your body or the left side of the body. It doesn't matter if I get it from the top side or the bottom side. It doesn't matter if I get it from the front side or the back side. It doesn't matter where I get it from. If it's in the bloodstream, it's in the bloodstream, and you're going to find it in the bloodstream, right? Because it gets all mixed up. And so when you measure a chemical in any vein, artery, or part of the body, it's essentially the same concentration throughout the bloodstream. Of course, there are variations. Veins are going to have a lower oxygen content than arteries do. Veins are going to have a higher carbon dioxide content than the arteries do, and so on. But you would never draw blood from a vein and find no oxygen and find it in the arteries, right? It'll be different concentrations, very, very little bit difference between one and the other, but you're going to find it throughout the whole system, right? And those chemicals are going to come out or be given by the blood vessels, usually at the capillaries, and now it's going to flow between the cells. Because how many of your cells live in the blood? Well, your red blood cells do. A number of your white blood cells do, right? And then you have the cells that line the arteries and the veins, the endothelial cells, all right? So all of those live in contact with the blood, but most of the cells of your body aren't actually directly in contact with the blood. So the nutrients in the blood have to get out of the blood and then kind of flow around the cells of the body and then eventually get back in and then continue circulating around. And your cells have this wonderful thing called a cell membrane. And that cell membrane, remember what they called it in cellular biology class? It's a phospholipid bilayer. There you go, phospholipid bilayer. Phospho, and they've got these phosphates groups on the outside, lipid, fatty on the inside, and it's a bilayer because you have one that looks like this on this side and the other that's like that on the opposite side, and they fit together. And they call it a selectively permeable membrane because there are certain chemicals that can get right in and right out, like that's what that represents. But there's other ones where they can't get in and out unless there's a specific channel for them to go through. And some of them, as long as the channel is there, they can go according to their concentration gradient and they can push right across. And other ones, they have active channels where they can take chemicals and push them against their concentration gradient and then concentrate them on one side or the other. All right. And that's important for us to remember later when we start talking about some diseases. Right? So I'm just, we gotta have the foundation, building the foundation first. So those molecules are either used in their current form or they're transformed. They'll break them down into smaller molecules or atoms, which releases the energy and the cells can use to function. Somebody mentioned ATP last night, right? Adenosine triphosphate. So that's part of that breaking down process. Or they are transformed by adding them to other molecules or atoms to form larger molecules and structures. And so the cells have a lot of work to do in taking molecules, breaking them down, reforming, and then using the energy from that to actually do processes in the cell. And the molecules are then used to make part of the structure of the cells or the products that the cells produce. All right. And the byproducts of those chemical processes, those are released or given back into the fluid around the cells, and they eventually get back into the blood. Now, those byproducts, do you want to keep them forever? No, so you want to get rid of them, and there's several ways that we get rid of them. So those chemicals are taken into the blood, they're transported, and then they're given to the lungs, the skin, the kidneys, the intestines, or the liver, which then take the chemicals, they process them, they expel them in the breath, sweat, urine, and feces. Right? So you can see every step of the way, it functions according to the fundamental law of taking, using, and giving. Every step along the way. It's always the same order. It's always taking first. It's always using next. It's always giving third. And proper function can only be maintained when this order is maintained. Right? If you get out of order and you try to give before you take, or you try to use after you gave, or anything of that nature, then you will run into dysfunction. Right? When you change the order of the function, you will end up with dysfunction. Now, chemicals always react according to the laws that govern their function. All right? Chemicals always react according to the laws that govern their function. And chemicals, if they are put together in the same order with the same concentration under the same conditions, they will always react the same way. That's why you can go to chemistry class and you can do experiments and you can know what kind of result you're going to get back from those experiments because chemical reactions occur according to law. Right? There's law that governs chemical reactions. And so chemical reactions are simply function according to the laws that govern their function, and there can never be a choice or a voluntary action in something that is just chemical. Right? There can never be choice or there can never be a voluntary action in something that is just chemical, because chemicals simply function according to law. And they will react according to law, right? But there can be some very complex reactions that happen in chemical things, right? You take let's say, for instance, a Venus flytrap, right? So you have a plant, and a plant, it's a living thing, right? It's a living organism, but it doesn't have a spirit. But how does it move, right? How does it move? Because it does. It moves, and it reacts. Well, if you've ever seen the inside of it, it has two little triggers, right? Two little kind of little spikes that are on the inside of it. And if anything comes along, doesn't matter what that anything is, and it flips one of those, if it only flips one, you don't get a reaction, but it'll flip one and the other one that's in there, then it'll trigger an electrical response that causes the cells on the outside to grow really fast. And that Venus flytrap closes. And now it has digestive enzymes that it can release and so on, and then whatever is caught in there can get digested. And if it was a stick that you put in there, it won't digest it. The poor thing will die. But if it was a fly or something like that, then it will digest and get some of that energy and continue to function. So you can have some very complex movements that happen simply from a chemical reaction. Right? So chemicals can react, they can never act for themselves, and for there to be choice and voluntary action, there has to be something that's not chemical. Right? In order for there to be choice, in order for there to be voluntary action, there has to be something that is not chemical. There has to be something that's spiritual. So you have choice and the ability to act for yourself because you have a spirit. Right? And that's what gives you the ability to do so. And choice or action can only be present in a system at the level of the spirit, not at the level of the body. Right? So these are all important things for us to remember. You don't have choice in the body. You've got choice in the mind. Right? But the choice in your mind can affect what happens in the body, right? So the body can only react. It cannot act for itself. So without your spirit, there could be no voluntary actions. There could be no ability to start, stop, increase, or decrease the rate of chemical reactions, or there could not be the ability to coordinate the body's functions the way that it's coordinated, right? So for all of that, you need to have a spirit. You have to have a mind, right? So the process is controlled and coordinated by the spirit through the nervous system, or it's by the mind. And so proper function of the entire process of digestion in humans always includes choice. So it always includes the spirit, right? It always includes choice, so it always includes the spirit. If you don't know that, and you don't consider the mind or the spirit in the action of all of this, and you evaluate it simply as a physical process, you're going to come to wrong conclusions. Right? You're going to draw wrong conclusions about how things function. And then how do you treat it? Right? So there are many parts of the process that are simply chemical and operate without the spirit's direct involvement. But without the spirit, the entire process will ultimately fail because it's the spirit that initiates or stops the process and controls and coordinates its operation. Right? So the spirit does not control what acid does. And it doesn't control what digestive enzymes do to the food. It doesn't. That is all a chemical reaction. There is no choice for that. All right? That's just chemical. So that happens according to natural laws, but the spirit can control how much acid and how much of the digestive enzymes are produced. All right? So what the acid does, what the enzymes do, no control of that. That's just chemical. But how much of it is produced, that you can control. Consciously or unconsciously? Unconsciously. Right? It's an unconscious control. Nobody goes around thinking, okay, I need about 30,000 more molecules of hydrochloric acid at this time in order to try to get my stomach pH down to 2.3 because it's at 2.4, and that's not sufficient for me to digest, and so on. No, this is unconscious. So the spirit does not control the diffusion or distribution of chemicals in the bloodstream. That's simply a chemical process. Right? That happens according to natural laws. But the spirit can control what you eat and how much of it that you eat and when you eat it, and thus it can affect the chemicals that are available to be distributed in the bloodstream and to the rest of the body. Right? So you see, there's certain components of it there's no control of, but there are other components of it that there definitely is control of. Right? And while we don't have an accountability for the things we cannot control, there is an accountability for the things that we can control. Right? So the spirit does not control what bile is made of and how it acts upon fats in the small intestine, but it can control when the bile is released and how much is released. Right? It can affect that. Now there are also reflex mechanisms that are there too, but there's override. Right? There's override capacity through the mind. So, what about genes? How do genes play into all of this and genetics? Well, the molecules that cells can bring into themselves is dependent upon genetics, because for you to bring in certain molecules, you have to have the transporters to do it. And in order to have the transporters, you have to have the information that makes the transporter. And the information for the transporter comes through the genes, right? Comes through the genetics. And so that's necessary. And DNA contains the code or the information for everything the cells can produce and the blueprint for the structure of the cells. So some molecules can only be brought into the cell if there are certain proteins in the cell membrane that can transport those molecules across the cell membrane into the cell. And so the transport proteins are made from the information in the DNA, and if the DNA doesn't have the information for that kind of protein, well, then the cell can't make it. And the chemical that would have been transported can't be brought into the cell because it doesn't have the transporter for it. And so when the molecules do get inside the cell, what the cell can do with them is also dependent upon the DNA, because it's dependent upon the structure that's there inside the cell. And the structure inside the cell is made based upon what information? The information from the DNA, right? So the code that comes in the genetics is necessary for the structure of the cells, which determines their function, and for all the products that the cells make. And if the DNA has information for how to use the molecule or for where it goes, then the cell can do something with it. And if the DNA doesn't have the information for how to use the molecule or where it goes, then the cell can't do anything with it. And you would have no brain cells if it wasn't for the information in the DNA that's there for how to build them. Right? So you have to use the blueprint, you have to use the information to build the structure. And physical information for physical structure. So neurons couldn't produce or release neurotransmitters if the information for each of those neurotransmitters was not already in the DNA. And the cells that produce digestive enzymes or mucus or acid or bile, they could only exist if the information for their structure is in the DNA. And those cells could only produce their products if the formula for the products was already in the DNA as well. Isn't that nice? Yeah, so you need information to build or create anything, and the information has to be there first. So whatever each cell does is dependent upon the DNA to have the information that component, for that component or its structure or the recipe for the product that it's supposed to make. It's got to be there first. Right? So how much that happens in the body is associated with genetics? Everything, right? Everything. Everything is associated with genetics, right? There's nothing that's not associated with genetics that happens in the physical structure of the body, right? Now, chemical reactions, since chemical reactions are dependent upon the natural laws that govern their action, and since natural laws do not change, right? It's part of the foundation that you can stand on, have a foundation that doesn't move. That's physical laws, right? Natural laws. Therefore, chemical reactions do not change. So under the same conditions, they're going to react the same way. But you can alter the rate of the reactions by altering the concentration of the chemical. So you increase the concentration, typically you can make the reaction happen faster. If you increase the surface area where you can get to it, that can increase the rate of the reaction. And if you can alter the orientation of the chemical. So sometimes, like let's say for instance you have an antibody, and the antibody is identifying a particular protein. Well, it will only identify one part of the protein, not all parts of the protein. So if you want the antibody to attach to the protein faster, you have to orient the protein the right way, and then the attachment happens faster. So that's what I mean by the orientation of each of the chemicals. You can add the presence of a catalyst, like an enzyme, and what an enzyme does in a biological system is it helps to orient the molecules so that they're in the right orientation so that they can react faster. So now your reactions can happen on a faster basis. You can change the temperature of the system. And which way do you want to change the temperature in order to make the reactions go faster? Heat it up. Just look at a snake. Right? Just look at a snake. Get it hot out and the snake can go pretty fast. Stick the snake in the fridge. All right, for those of you that like doing up-close macro photography, and you want to get some good macro photography of a snake or a reptile, throw it in the fridge for a while. And then when you pull it out, it's going to be very slow, and you can get some nice still shots and close and so on without it going, and away from you and, and whatever. And if you throw it in the freezer, it will go really slow. Yeah, it won't survive the freezer. All right, and you can also alter the rate of reaction by altering the pressure exerted on a system with gases. So the more pressure the system has, the more you compress the molecules together, the more they interact with each other, and the faster the reactions can happen. So one of the ways that you can do that is by holding your epiglottis closed and trying to breathe out against it, like you're ready to cough. Right? What that's doing is that's closing off the escape way for the air, and now the muscles of the rib cage and the diaphragm are pushing against the lungs, compressing it, and now it's increasing the pressure in there, and now you concentrate the gases that are in there. Now you can have a faster reaction that happens. And you can have a faster, well, you essentially increase the pressure, it's called partial pressure, of the oxygen, and you can force more oxygen into the blood vessels under those conditions. And individuals that are right on the verge, they're right on the verge of not getting enough oxygen with their breathing because their breathing is compromised, what they'll start doing is it's what we call auto-peep or peeping. It's positive end expiratory pressure, and an individual will start kind of grunting with their breathing and so on because they're forcing the epiglottis to close a bit in order to increase the pressure inside the lungs to force more oxygen into the bloodstream in order to increase their oxygen levels. Are they doing it consciously or unconsciously? Unconscious. But if you know what's happening and you know the physics of it and you're a doctor and you watch the patient and you notice that they're doing it, you know they're struggling. And you know what's happening is their oxygen level is dropping. and they're trying to keep their oxygen levels up unconsciously, but they're doing so in a physical process in the body. Now, where can your spirit interact with any of these factors that increase or decrease reactions? Well, it can affect the concentration of each chemical by choosing how much you consume, and to a degree, but still unconscious, the mind actually has a function in controlling absorption rates. Right? Now, not completely. I mean, mind involved or not, there's certain things that you're going to absorb, but there is the impact of the mind in increasing or decreasing the absorbability of a number of different chemicals. For example, cholesterol. If you have cholesterol in your system, which even if you're not eating animal products, you still do, because cholesterol is the major component of bile. And bile gets dumped into your digestive tract. It's mostly cholesterol. And you have a reabsorption of the cholesterol at the latter part of the small intestine, and then it goes back to the liver and gets recycled and so on. It's called the enterohepatic circulation. You can adjust the rates of cholesterol absorption anywhere between about 25% to 75% of all cholesterol consumed. The enterohepatic circulation itself is pretty effective. About 95% is reabsorbed just from that standpoint. But if you're consuming cholesterol, so there's a big range between 25% of the cholesterol that you consume being absorbed to 75% of it being absorbed. What makes the difference? Unconsciously. Not saying conscious. Unconsciously, it's the mind that controls that, right? So can that play into cholesterol levels and hypercholesterolemia and heart disease and so on and so forth? Well, yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. And the spirit can interact with these factors by causing the enzyme-producing cells to increase their production of those enzymes. So now you have more enzymes to make reactions happen faster. By controlling the body's temperature, because that's controlled up here too, so you could increase your temperature and increase then the metabolic activity, or by controlling the pressure exerted on the lungs, like I just demonstrated with your, and increasing the pressure from that standpoint. And besides physical trauma or chemical exposures like acids or bases or whatever, and deficiencies where you don't have enough of what you need, the only other factor that can cause changes to the function of the body is the spirit, right? So yes, you can have physical trauma that can do that. You can have, deficiencies and so on that happen. But if you're going to change the function of what happens in the body and how fast things happen in the body, that's going to be a factor that comes through the spirit or the mind, right? So that is the major factor when it comes to proper function or when it comes to dysfunction, right? So sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. We will beat this one to life as well. So, considering what we've learned so far, then let's look at dysfunction, how dysfunction can be introduced into the process of digestion. So, this is a case where digestion was happening normally, and then you have dysfunction, all right? So you had normal function for a period of time, however long that period of time was, and now you have a period of dysfunction with your digestion. Now, dysfunction will never develop at the level of the laws that govern chemical reactions, because the laws are always, they're constant, they're the same. That's not going to change, right? So dysfunction will never develop because chemicals change how they function or how they react. It's not going to happen, right? That's always fixed. And acid will always function like acid functions. Enzymes will always function like enzymes function. Mucus will always function like mucus functions. And everything physical operates according to the laws that govern their function. That doesn't change. So if we're going to introduce dysfunction into the system, the question is, where can that dysfunction be introduced? If the DNA is damaged, then the component of the cell structure made by that damaged piece of DNA, or the product that's being produced by that cell that needs the recipe from the DNA, that's going to be dysfunctional. All right? So you'll have a part of the cell structure that's dysfunctional, or you'll have the product that the cell produces that's dysfunctional because the blueprint is dysfunctional. And if that structural abnormality is too large or too critical, then the cell's going to die. Right? Because it just can't continue to function with that defect, that deficit that's there. If the abnormality was not so critical, the cell might continue to live, and it continues in a dysfunctional state. Right? So it can't function the way that it's optimally supposed to. And if the cell now replicates, and now you have 2 of them, and then the 2 replicate, and now you have 4 of them, and now the 4 replicate, and you have 8 of them, and so on, then it would pass on the same dysfunction to its daughter cells, and all would be dysfunctional to the same degree, right? And have the same type of dysfunction, right? Now, the problem would increase slowly over time as the dysfunctional cells reproduce and grew in number. Make sense? It's like the idea that we have of cancer. You know, cancer starts and it's got a bad cell, and then you've got 2 bad cells, and then 4 bad cells, and so on and so forth, and then it just gets bigger and bigger in its particular location. So the problem would only get worse and would not get better unless somehow the dysfunctional cells died or were destroyed and removed. All right? So in this case, you would have something where you had normal digestion, and then you start having a little digestive dysfunction, and then you have a little more digestive dysfunction, and then you have a little more digestive dysfunction, and then you have a little more digestive dysfunction, and it kind of gets more and more and more and more and more progressively over time. That's what that would look like as far as symptoms are concerned. Right. The problem wouldn't get better at some times, get worse at other times, and kind of go back and forth. Right? You wouldn't see this back and forth wavy, better and worse at different times. If you're seeing that back and forth, better at times, worse at times, kind of going back and forth, it's not this process that we're talking about, it's something else. Now, we can ask ourselves, what can damage the DNA? Well, there's a number of things. All right. And with a very robust DNA repair mechanism, or several mechanisms, why is the damage not repaired? Because you do. You have DNA repair mechanisms so that if there's a wrong letter that's put in there, or things are changed around and whatever, you've got checking systems that go through in the genetic material to check and make sure everything matches and it's looking the way that it's supposed to look. So how come it didn't catch it? We got to ask ourselves that question too, right? And with a very effective repairing system, which we call the immune system, I think it's a misnomer. It tells you that it's ready for everything before it came. Now, it's a response mechanism. It's a repair mechanism. It's not a prepared for everything before it comes system. So with a very effective repairing system, why were the dysfunctional cells not removed? All right, so we have to ask ourselves all of these, and all of these are not answered by the initial problem. All right? There's something else going on. So what is it that controls the immune system? What is it that controls the repairing mechanisms? And how can that dysfunction? And how much of an impact does this have in that? Right? And that dysfunction also. All right, so if all of these mechanisms failed, what's the cause of their failure? And what ultimately controls and directs the repairing mechanisms of the body? Therefore, where do you need to look to find the cause? Yeah, you got to look at the mind, right? Got to look at the mind. So if you have that kind of process where it begins one cell, then more cells, and then it kind of grows from there, and it just progressively gets worse over time, and so on and so forth. We still need to be considering the mind, right, under those conditions. Now, another cause of digestive dysfunction could be physical trauma, right? So if you drank battery acid, I don't suggest it. Right? One of those disclaimers, don't try this at home. Right? Drinking battery acid is not a good idea. Or if you drink other caustic chemicals, if you're shot, stabbed, or in a car accident that damages your digestive organs, well, you can have dysfunction as a result, clearly. Right? But another cause of digestive dysfunction includes the absorption of poisons. Anybody ever had that? And how does your digestive system handle that? Get rid of the poison. One end or the other. And sometimes both. Yes. So one response of the digestive system to poisons is to attempt to expel as much of the poisons possible before much more of it is absorbed into the body, and that's vomiting and diarrhea. Right? Don't like it, miserable, please no, but it's there to expel, right? It's there for a good reason. And as poisons are chemicals, they can react with other chemicals, so they can stop or disrupt the function of the chemicals that it reacts with, and that can lead to the underproduction or the non-production of needed products, and that can disrupt normal function. So maybe there's the possibility that with the exposure of a poison, you're not able to produce the mucus that you normally would. I'm not saying this is, I'm just making something up, right? So you have some poison, you take it, now you can't produce any more mucus, but you're still producing acid. And the mucus was there to cover the lining of the normal cells to make sure the acid doesn't digest the normal cells, and now you don't have the mucus, but you have the acid. It's going to be a little problematic, slightly. But the main cause, keep this in mind, for digestive dysfunction is related to the consumption and production, right? So if you underconsume needed nutrients, then you're going to end up with deficiencies, which will cause dysfunction. And if you overconsume needed nutrients, then you're going to end up with dysfunction by toxicities, obesity, and so on and so forth. Where does that come from? Underconsumption and overconsumption? Yeah, it's mind, hand, mouth disease, right? And if you underproduce digestive enzymes, acid, bile, and mucus, then you're going to end up with dysfunction as well. And if you overproduce them, you're going to end up with dysfunction. And so what is it that controls the consumption of nutrients and the production of enzymes, acid, bile, and mucus? That's your mind. Right? It's the spirit through the nervous system, or the mind. So the mind is the primary culprit when it comes to bodily dysfunction or disease that begins after a period of normal function. Right? So things were functioning normally, and now you have dysfunction. Right? You did not have reflux before, you've got reflux now. You did not have diarrhea before, you have diarrhea now. You did not have constant nausea before, you have constant nausea now. Main culprit? The mind, right? Keep that in mind. So the mind is the primary culprit for conditions that come and go or improve and worsen over time after a period of normal function before. Right? Now, let's take the example. We'll take two examples before we close of common issues that we deal with digestively. So a common dysfunction of the digestive tract is gastritis. So now that stomach's burning. So it is associated with abnormal production of acid and mucus in the stomach. So you have too little mucus and or too much acid, right? That's the imbalance. So the acid starts damaging the cells lining the stomach because there's insufficient mucus to protect them from the acid and the digestive enzymes. And so now you start getting inflammation. And gastritis, as everybody knows, can come and go. Right? There are times when you have it, there's times when it's worse, there's other times when you're okay, there's times when it's better, and so on. And it can get worse, it can get better over time. It can lead to the development of ulcers, and it can go away entirely. Right? I know individuals that, without treatment, their gastritis ended up going away. So, where are you going to find the cause if this is how it manifests? Where's the problem located? All right, well, the cause is here, and the effect is here. Right? So the effect, there's a very real effect. You can measure it, you can look at it, you can study it, you can scope it, you can do all of that kind of stuff. It's there, it's very real, it's very physical. It's not like it's not there. It's not just all in your head. But where does it begin? It begins in the head, in the mind, right? Now, another one is GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disease, also known as heartburn or reflux. And so in that case, that little sphincter at the top of the stomach that's supposed to squeeze off and not let the gastric contents go back up to the esophagus, it's not working like it's supposed to. And instead of contracting like it's supposed to, it kind of relaxes and it allows this stuff to get up into the esophagus. Now, the stomach is made with tons of cells that can produce mucus and protect the lining. The esophagus is not. And so it doesn't have all of that mucus production. And so if the acid contents of the stomach get up into the the acid contents of the stomach get up into the esophagus, it'll burn, right? It'll burn. So, I said that. So that irritates the esophagus. It results in inflammation, swelling, you get pain. And you can also get a cramp or a spasm that happens in the esophagus. And oh boy, does it feel like you're dying, right? And as an emergency doc, I have had plenty of patients that have come in that were sure they were having a heart attack because they had an elephant sitting on their chest. And it was just about to kill them. And it was reflux, because the esophagus was spasming. And when the esophagus spasms, oh boy, it feels like you're going to die. How do I know? Because I felt like I was going to die. Mine's usually the case where I am being a little intemperate, drinking fast, and getting one swallow after the other really quickly. And now you got one bolus of water trying to go down, and you get the other bolus of water come in, and now they meet each other, and then it goes, and it goes, and oh, you want to just bend over and die, and you're like, oh, please stop this. Oh. And then when it finally releases and lets go, you're like, oh, man, I can breathe again. So I understand, right? So it can be very painful, absolutely painful. And that acidic material can regurgitate all the way up into the airway, and it can be a result of coughing, and so you can have a chronic cough because you have gastritis going on as well. And GERD usually occurs after somebody had normal function for a period of time. There are cases where it goes away without treatment, and it certainly is worse at times, and it's better at other times. And it does get worse with stress. Yes, it does get worse with stress. So when looking for a cause, where should you look? I look at the mind. That's right. And there are other factors, right? So if you have higher estrogen levels, if you're eating chocolate, if you have caffeine, alcohol, high-fat meals, overeating, abdominal obesity, all of those are going to be contributing factors. But if you see a direct correlation between what you eat and the symptoms that you have, and you have the symptoms after you eat, and then they go away, and then you don't have the symptoms otherwise, and it's dependent upon what you eat, well, cut that out. Right? Cut it out. There's a clear correlation there. But if you find it coming and going, even when it's not around eating times, there's some other cutting to do. Right? So, what controls all of those other factors? Mind. Yeah. What is it that controls the consumption of caffeine and chocolate, and controls estrogen levels, and controls abdominal obesity? Yeah, sure. So it shouldn't surprise us. And we've all had very clear experiences that shows that the mind is directly controlling the digestive system. Butterflies in your stomach? Oh, yeah. Oh, that first time that you had to give a speech up front, and all of a sudden you have to puke, or you have to pee, or you have to do something else, and, it just feels like all of your guts are trying to evert and come out, all because of the thought of being in front of somebody and speaking. Yes. So, yes, sometimes you have all of these things because of stress. We've all experienced it before, right? The sympathy which exists between the mind and the body is very great. When one is affected, the other responds. The condition of the mind has much to do with the health of the physical system. If the mind is free and happy under a consciousness of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others, it will create a cheerfulness that will react upon the whole system, causing a freer circulation of the blood and toning up of the entire body. The blessing of God is a healer, and those who are abundant in benefiting others will realize that wondrous blessing in their hearts and lives. Beautiful. So is there a mind-body connection? Oh, yes, you bet. And it's necessary for function, and it is necessary, and it's going to be involved in dysfunction as well. So now Angela has another activity for us so that we can think more upon these things.
All right. Another packed lesson, right? All right. So how do we make it personal? How do we take things away and incorporate them to make them ours before the end of this week? So I have some questions to help you ponder. Number 1, if the mind is the primary culprit for conditions that come and go, improve, or worsen over time, then what dysfunctions are you struggling with that could be based in the mind? Right? Number 2, is your mind free and happy under a consciousness of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others? And number 3, if no, start right now. Start the process of healing by writing a list of your negative thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. We're going to continue that process as we go, and so take the time. So you can break into groups, and you can do some individual work as well. If you're a breakout leader, go ahead and raise hands, and Dr. Mark will give you a sheet.
Is your mind free and happy under a constant right being and a sense of satisfaction?
That way you can.
Right being and a sense of satisfaction.
Mark was saying that your computer wasn't as I don't know
Ask the question and answer it. So if you focus on doing what I ask you, which is seeking me first, my will, and my will is for you to go and bless others, for you to go and share the gospel in whatever capacity. Yeah. And then you will be happy. Rather than abiding
The starting process of healing by writing a list of your many problems. No, we want to hear Well, this is getting back to what Mark mentioned. Because you want to play darkness. Those darkness
it's supposed to be like, and of course the person is love it. You just understand these things that are happening.
What sort of a thing?
Are true.
Love.
Be just. Honest. If there be any virtues,
They're being correct.
think on these things, Doris. Yeah.
Okay, I want to say, I'm being serious.
I'm Doris. I'm Anita. And you're Louise. But you already know them. Nice to meet all of you. Doris. Oh.
She was singing with me, yes. Yes, she will.
It's not special music. Some sort of song show. That's what we're
Yeah. Yeah. She can't. Drug test has been both recording and decent. We had some issues. A moment ago we had some more, but it seemed like I never had a cash for 2 years. Whatever the reset you did was good. It helped.
All right, let me give them like the early. Test, test, test. There we go. All right, so we had some discussion time. That's very good. I suggest you get some stretch your legs time as well. We've got 15 minutes between, or hang on, Jonathan, when's the next meeting? 15 minutes. So we've got 19 minutes right now. Between now and the next meeting starting, it'll be at 11:15. And so go ahead and stretch your legs, bathroom break, water, other things of that nature. And then we'll be back here at 11:15.